Hello! Welcome back, everybody! Now, in the last episode, I briefly touched on a major technological shift occurring within the gaming industry during the mid-90s, that being the jump from 2D to 3D. And while Sony was leading the pack with the original PlayStation, Nintendo had been experimenting with 3D graphics in other ways before then. In fact, Shigeru Miyamoto had only started coming up with ideas for what eventually became Super Mario 64 while working on the original Star Fox. He even had a prototype built that ran on the SNES utilizing the Super FX chip, but the scope of the project was just too much for the technology to handle. When focus then shifted to the Nintendo 64, much of this game's production became a race against the clock, with Miyamoto and his team even repurposing scrapped ideas from The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time just to cut down on development. But when they feared that they weren't going to be able to finish the game in time for the N64's launch, Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi was so confident in Mario 64 that he delayed the release of the console by another 2 months just to give Miyamoto more time to finish the game. I'm sure Nintendo's marketing team was thankful for that too, because that meant they could use those extra 2 months to hype the game up even more. And this game was hyped up big time. It's like no matter where you were in the world, you couldn't go 1 second without having Mario 64 ads and commercials shoved into your face. Old timer? Mario had only existed for 15 years by that point. He technically wasn't even old enough to drink yet. And if you were a Nintendo Power subscriber, you were also treated with this VHS promo tape about 3 of the best gamers in the country being invited to Nintendo's headquarters to playtest some N64 games. Yeah, because that would totally happen today. Mario 64 is only featured briefly here, but it's certainly one of the most memorable parts of the video. For better or worse.
Oh, did you see that?
Yo, you see the way he went to that door?
I'm kidding.
Oh, wow! Mario can walk through doors now! Cause he's never done that before! But there are some neat little tidbits about this video. Not only do we get to see some beta footage of Star Fox 64 and the pre-GameCube version of Kirby Air Ride, but after doing some research, I came across the IMDb page of one of the gamers featured in the video, David Checkle, or Chessel, or however you pronounce it. And according to his IMDb, he apparently went on to become an editor and worked on music videos for artists like Christina Aguilera, John Legend, and Usher, as well as movies like Burlesque and Tekken. Oh. I guess this story doesn't have a happy ending after all. It's easy to scoff at Mario 64 being anywhere near as big as the kind of games that are being made today, but for its time, it was incredibly ambitious. Other 3D games were slowly creeping their way to store shelves before Mario 64, but nothing of the same magnitude. It's almost more impressive considering the game was made by a group of just 15 people, with Miyamoto sitting in the director's chair one last time for the mainline series, and Yoshiaki Koizumi serving as assistant director before basically becoming the captain of the 3D Mario ship. Super Mario 64 wasn't just a turning point for the franchise, it also revolutionized the 3D platforming genre and set the standard for future games of this style. Games like Banjo-Kazooie, A Hat in Time, Penny's Big Breakaway, and other open-world games practically owe their entire existence to Mario 64. I know this game means a lot to me personally because this was one of many that my cousins introduced me to by letting me play them at their house. But since I first reviewed it back in 2015, I actually inherited the copy they had when I was growing up. So now I can say that the cartridge I own is the same one I played as a kid. Speaking of which, I gotta say, before going back and watching my original review, I thought it was gonna be a lot more cringy, but it surprisingly holds up alright. You can definitely tell it was made in 2015 though, since it opens with an old Mario 64 Got Milk commercial mixed with a Shia LaBeouf Do It meme. Hey, I didn't say the video was completely devoid of cringe. But I've actually got another doubleheader for you today, because I'm not just revisiting the original N64 game, I'm also going to be looking back on the DS version, which I briefly touched on in my original Mario 64 review before giving it its own separate video about 1.5 years later. Although in the process of recording footage for that game this time around, 2/3 of my footage got corrupted, so I essentially lost 3 hours of gameplay. Which, you know, it was always fun. This is still pretty exciting for me though, because before going back and getting new clips to replace the ones I lost, I'd actually gotten my 3DS modded so that I could plug it into my computer and directly record footage off of it. So while most of what you'll see of Mario 64 DS later on was recorded through the Wii U Virtual Console release, if you see I have 151 Power Stars instead of 150, you'll know I recorded it from my physical DS cartridge. Yeah, I used Action Replay a lot with this game back in the day, which would always make it freeze specifically at the start of the Chief Chili level. I guess it's funny to think about since it's an ice level, but now replaying it elicits PTSD-like reactions from me. As for getting footage of the original, at first I considered playing the version included on Super Mario 3D All-Stars since it has the smoothest textures and generally looks the best despite being locked to 720p and not having widescreen. But that port was based on the Japanese exclusive Shindo edition that added support for the Rumble Pack and also patched out some game-breaking glitches, much to the chagrin of speedrunners everywhere. So for the sake of authenticity, I went with the Switch Online version. Now, without anything resembling a decent transition, let's jump back to the 5th generation of consoles and see if Super Mario 64 still holds up after nearly 30 years. God, I'm old. So, when you boot it up, the game's logo reminds you of what you're playing, and then you're greeted with a giant floating Mario head on the title screen. Now, apparently this is a leftover from a demo version of Mario Artist Paint Studio, but this concept was also the basis of the Mario in Real-Time road shows from the early 90s. Then the same technology was incorporated into the CD-ROM versions of Mario Teaches Typing. I'm not sure what Nintendo's obsession was with having people interact with Mario's disembodied head, but Mario 64 puts a fun twist on this idea by letting players pull and stretch parts of his face. When I was a kid, I used to always pull the corners of Mario's mustache over his eyes to make it look like he was wearing sunglasses. Did anyone else do this, or was it just me? Well, I love that they give you something fun to do before you even start the game. It also greatly gives you a sense of just how much freedom you'll have, since you can make Mario look like an alien crab, or a sleep paralysis demon. Now, despite the generational leap in terms of gameplay and technology, the story is just as basic as always. Princess Peach writes a letter to Mario inviting him to the castle for some cake, but when he arrives, Mario is told that Bowser had stormed the castle, stolen these things called Power Stars, and presumably used their power to trap Peach and her toads inside the castle walls. I'm not sure how accurate that last part is, because while you do find toads all over the castle, they're just chilling out in the open. I don't think the way the paintings work is ever explained either. Peach's castle is filled with paintings that Mario can jump into and be transported to one of 15 different worlds. But whether this is just how the paintings work or if the Power Stars created worlds within the paintings is a little vague. The instruction manual does mention Bowser planning on using the Power Stars to turn the creatures inside the painting worlds into monsters, and that they'll eventually make their way out into the real world. But this isn't really a thing in the game. I guess that would explain where the bosses come from, like the Womp King and such, but none of them ever leave their respective worlds at any point. Wait, what's this say? Will Princess Toadstool be kidnapped again? Wasn't she already, though? Well, what actually matters now is that Mario has to recover the Power Stars, rescue Peach, beat Bowser, save the day, and get the cake he was promised. You don't just promise a man free cake and not deliver. That's just criminal. Like I said, the game's approach to storytelling doesn't really change as we go from 2D to 3D, but where Super Mario 64 really pushes the franchise and the entire industry forward is in how it plays. As you can see, the game is an open-world 3D platformer and one of the earliest examples of these kinds of games. It also set the standard for other similar 3D games to come, as many aspects of its design would become synonymous with the genre. It has large open spaces for you to explore, collectibles for you to grab that let you unlock more areas and get you farther along on your adventure, and a camera that rotates around the character and helps you see more of the worlds. In my original video, I brought up some slight issues I had with the camera, and pretty much everything I said back then still applies. Unless it's a Bowser stage, the camera can be pretty stubborn at times. You can change the angle at which it points at you to try and get a better look at your surroundings, but you still won't always be guaranteed full 360-degree movement. I guess I shouldn't really blame the Lakitu. I mean, he's just trying his best. Yeah, I love how they explain the game's camera in-universe by just having a Lakitu filming Mario. That's cute. Much of the basic design philosophy applied to the 2D games is still present in Mario's first 3D outing, but Mario himself is a lot more agile this time around. His arsenal has been expanded to include several physical abilities that have since become trademarks, such as the triple jump, the ground pound from Yoshi's Island, the backwards somersault, the sideways somersault, and my personal favorite, the long jump. Presumably, this is something Mario picked up after training for the Summer Olympics that year, but while it would take a bit of time for him to get there, with Sonic the Hedgehog of all people, it's good to see those skills being put to use. You can also make him dive to cover some more distance. Ow. You can kill enemies by punching and kicking them in the face, jumping on them the old-fashioned way, or phasing through whomps when they try to crush you and then ground pounding on them. You can jump off walls to reach higher places, and you can even get down on all fours and crawl around like a rugrat, or climb up the side of pillars like a certain other red and blue character I know.
Spider-Man does whatever a Spider-Man can do.
For as much fun as playing with Mario can be in this game, however, the way he handles isn't always very tight or reliable. Sometimes making quick turns and performing certain moves can be a cinch, but other times it's a struggle because you just expect them to work all the time, and it's really disorienting when they don't. Mario's a little heavier than he was in the 2D games as well, which I could work around if the controls were more consistently precise, but of the small number of deaths I suffered, only a few of them were because of mistakes I made, like right here. It sucks that the Power Star was just within reach, but I got too careless climbing up these stairs, so that's all on me. And because I tried getting too fancy with my jumps in this stage, I nearly dove straight into the center of a sand whirlpool. But at least I got saved by this tornado. For the one time where they're actually beneficial to me. The rest of my deaths largely involved me slipping off of platforms and missing grabbing ledges, all of which only happened due to the controls suddenly getting really finicky or because of sporadic collision detection issues. Oh, wow. Yeah, that seems fair, doesn't it? But through all the technical hiccups I had to deal with, I could still get away with making Mario pull off some incredible feats, like this triple jump and wall jump combo I did in Tick-Tock Clock, the amazing ways I managed to save myself from falling off the stage, this one trick I love using to clip through the ceiling and get to the second floor of the castle without taking the stairs, or when I'm pretty sure I punched this fly guy and grabbed a Bob-omb at the same time. He's also got some sick dance moves.
That's the way I like it. La, 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 la.
With all these new abilities to take advantage of, Super Mario 64 seemingly focuses more on platforming and forgoes traditional power-ups like the Super Mushroom and the Fire Flower. And rather than giving Mario a small form or a super form to determine how many hits he can take, this game uses a health meter like in Mario 2 USA. With this, Mario is allowed to take up to 8 hits before losing a life and getting thrown out of whatever world he's in at the moment. He also takes damage if he falls from too great a height, so he's arguably not as durable in that sense, but you can replenish your health by picking up coins, which you get from killing enemies, breaking blocks, or finding them out in the open. The health meter also acts as an air meter for when Mario's underwater, so he gradually loses health the longer he holds his breath, which again is kind of a step down from the 2D games, but you can still refill it by resurfacing and, once again, collecting coins, as if to say money makes everything better and protects you from drowning. Unless you were a passenger on the Titanic submersible. But that's not to say the game completely does away with power-ups altogether. Like the 2D games, you can find 1-up mushrooms to gain some extra lives. Some are out in the open, some are hidden in secret spots, some pop out after you climb to the top of a pole, and some just float towards you, which leads to funny moments like this. Some areas also contain giant switches that turn block outlines into solid, different colored exclamation blocks when you press them, like in Super Mario World. Hitting these blocks then releases a special cap that Mario can wear to take on different forms. The red block gives him the wing cap, which lets him glide through the air while you figure out how to get around the shitty controls. The green block gives him the metal cap, turning him into a walking metal Mario that makes him completely invincible and lets him walk underwater. And the blue block gives him the vanish cap, which makes him invisible and also lets him walk through certain walls. So, just to summarize, he can walk through walls, disappear, and fly. He's an asshole. None of these forms last very long and are only needed in certain missions, so you could argue that they're not as fun to use when compared to more classic power-ups from the previous games. But personally, I don't think adding them would have made the game any better. Items like the Fire Flower and the Superstar were more of a means to an end in the 2D games, so hypothetically you could get through each stage in Mario 1, Mario 3, or Mario World without them. The special caps in Mario 64 have missions built around them, so while I agree that it does make them more situational, it at least gives them more significance, in a way. Plus, the Fire Flower would just give you another way of killing enemies, and the Superstar's inclusion would be kinda redundant with the metal cap. Either way, this would still be fun to do. Super Mario 64 was originally going to be more in line with the 2D games by having goal poles and being more linear, but it became more open-ended and explorative because the team felt it would be more fun for players to just roam around. Not sure what happened in the 2010s then. So instead of a world map, each of the game's areas are accessed by jumping into portals spread throughout Princess Peach's castle. Most of them appear in the form of paintings, which I mentioned earlier, but you can also jump into walls, cages, water, and either mercury or liquid metal. Oh, wait, since Hazy Maze Cave is where you get the metal cap, that last one would actually make more sense. The worlds aren't structured the same as the 2D games, where they were broken up into levels with different layouts that required you to get from point A to point B. In Super Mario 64, each area is broken up into missions. The layout of the world is mostly the same throughout, but what really changes are the requirements you need to meet to retrieve the Power Stars. They could be as simple as going from one part of the world to another, competing in running races against characters like Koopa the Quick, or just talking to a Toad and having him give you one. Other times you'll need to do something more involved, like locate 5 secret spots on the overworld, navigate your way through the inside of a pyramid, fight one of several different bosses, all of which are pathetically easy, or grab 8 red coins scattered across the map. Every world has 7 stars for you to collect, one for each of the 6 main missions, and a secret star for getting 100 coins in that area. But while your means of getting power stars differ from mission to mission, the game doesn't force you to go through each world in a specific way. Some stars might still be locked to their corresponding missions, but for the most part, you can grab power stars in whatever order you want. This Maw Ray in Jolly Roger Bay is taking way too long to swim away for me to go into the ship and clear the first mission, so I'll just swim on over to the cave and grab the star from this other mission. Sometimes I don't feel like going for the first power star in Big Boo's haunt either, so I might backwards somersault up to the second floor from this room right here and clear the red coin mission instead.
Oh God, what is that? No, stop, go away, Billy! Billy, save me!
Power stars aren't just there for the sake of collecting, however. You use them to unlock more rooms in the castle. And this leads me to my favorite aspect of Super Mario 64, and why I still find myself coming back to it from time to time. Reaching the end of the game isn't a matter of which missions you completed. What matters is how many stars you've collected. You see this for yourself as early as when you first enter the castle and grab your first power star from Bob-omb Battlefield. By the way, does anyone actually go and fight King Bob-omb before releasing the Chain Chomp? I know I don't. But even with just the 1 star in your possession, you can now either go back to Bob-omb Battlefield and keep going through its list of missions, or you can use that star to unlock the door to Whomp's Fortress and go star hunting there for a little bit. Or you can also unlock the door to Princess Peach's room, jump into a stained glass portal, and go down the secret slide to completely shred the seat of your pants and grab one of 2 stars at the bottom, one of which you get for reaching the finish line in 20 seconds or less. Super Mario 64 does a phenomenal job at encouraging you to play at your own pace without overwhelming you with too many options to consider. It basically takes the linearity of the 2D games and gives it a good The only things limiting your progress somewhat are the Bowser stages. You can still hypothetically approach them whenever you want once you have enough power stars to unlock these giant sliding doors. But you have to get to Bowser, swing him around by his tail, throw him at these bombs, and grab these keys that unlock the doors leading to the basement and the second floor if you want to reach the end. But on top of that, the Bowser stages also have power stars of their own, all of which revolve around collecting red coins. Yeah, so collecting power stars is ultimately the name of the game here, and while you only need about 70 to reach the final Bowser stage, Super Mario 64 has 120 stars in total for you to find. As some of you might remember, I didn't bother going for 100% completion when I did my original review. Back then, part of that was because I didn't really have the patience for it. But going into this video, I realized that I'd never actually beaten this game 100% before, even though I'd been playing it since I was a kid. So I figured I'd go ahead and do it for the sake of closure and getting the full Mario 64 experience. And collecting every single power star is definitely where the game is at its most difficult, but it's far from impossible. It's only really challenging because of how long it can take for you to meet the given requirements to even get to the star or make it appear in the first place, particularly when taking on the 100 coin missions. Sometimes worlds can have a select number of coins available, so you'll be spending a lot of time roaming aimlessly around the map just trying to find them. And sometimes getting 100 coins will only be guaranteed if you pick a certain mission where coins are easy to grab, although that isn't always the case. In my original video, I went so far as to say the 100 coin missions were the worst part of the game, but they're not nearly as bad as I made them out to be. They're just a little time-consuming. Same goes for the red coin missions, particularly the one in Hazy Maze Cave, which I used to have a rough time with, but now at its worst, I just find it a bit tedious. Honestly, there are plenty of other missions that I found much more annoying. Blast of the Stone Pillar in Jolly Roger Bay just plain sucks. You need to fire yourself out of a cannon to grab the top of a pillar and then jump onto a platform to grab the power star, but the collision on this big pointy rock is so janky that even if you touch the top of it, most of the time the game just won't let you cling onto it. The baby penguin mission in Cool Cool Mountain isn't as bad, but for some reason there are times where I would let go of the baby when jumping and sliding or touching a fence. And then when I would try to grab him again, if I took too long, he would just pop out of existence. You know what? For making me go through that, you deserve to die. Though maybe that's a little unfair, because the mission where you have to guide the snowman's head to its body is far worse in my opinion. Ugh, freaking hate this one. But let me tell you about my two least favorite stars in the entire game. Coincidentally, they're both red coin missions, they both take place in the sky, and they both revolve around the use of the wing cap. The area where you first get the wing cap opens with you up in the air mid-flight, and you pretty much immediately have to follow this path of coins to try to reach the red coins. But if you miss any, it takes forever to try and go back for them because the gliding controls are absolute garbage, and the wing cap's power wears off after a while, so you pretty much have to get them all in one go if you want to get the star. Over the Rainbows at least makes it easier to get the red coins, but they're much farther apart, and the area is so spacious and has very few recognizable set pieces, making it easy for you to get lost. Going after these two stars was legitimately tiring. Like, just look at what they did to Mario.
Ah, spaghetti. Ah, ravioli. Ah, mamma mia.
But at the end of the day, as annoying as certain missions can be, I never felt compelled to give up because I was still enjoying myself more often than not. Super Mario 64 had me hooked throughout the entire adventure because of how much fun I had running around and seeing my star count gradually go up. Playing through this and the Switch version of Thousand Year Door made me realize how much I find the process of collecting things so addictive. It taps into that obsessive part of my brain craving for something to keep me occupied or give me a goal to accomplish. And after getting all the power stars in Mario 64, resetting the game and opening your save file, there's this cannon outside Peach's castle that you can use to fire yourself up to the roof, where you can find your good old pal Yoshi, who really needs to work on his grammar. He delivers a message from the developers thanking you for playing, then grants you 100 lives, makes your triple jump all sparkly, and then just jumps off the roof. Okay, bye. Funnily enough, Shigeru Miyamoto actually teased Yoshi's appearance in this game in an issue of Nintendo Power from 1996 that I just so happened to own before Mario 64 came out. That's pretty cool. If only he warned us about what would happen if we tried tilting the cartridge while it was in the system.
It's me, Mario!
I tend to be very picky about 100% completion rewards in video games, but while a 45-second cameo from Yoshi and the abundance of extra lives after already finishing the main quest might sound like pretty weak rewards, I felt it was worth it. It was like going to Chuck E. Cheese for getting good grades in school. That feeling you have as a kid working towards something, the pride and ecstasy that comes with your reward, and the sense of relief knowing that you and your family survived the brawl in the middle of the restaurant. How did that become so common for these places, and why are so many of those parents out for blood? I mean, Jesus. So, overall, what's my new verdict on Super Mario 64? Well, it's definitely showing signs of its age, especially as we get closer to its 30th anniversary, but I still had a lot of fun playing it again, even if it doesn't hold up that well in some areas. I'm not sure if this is due to its age or issues with N64 emulation on the Switch, but while I already mentioned a few technical oddities I ran into over the course of my playthrough, needless to say, those weren't the only ones. Like, there was another instance when I first got to the pole jumping for red coins mission in Dire Dire Docks, and the poles just didn't appear. That was pretty bizarre because, you know, I kinda needed them to get the star. Collision detection can also be pretty inconsistent, as I hinted at earlier in the video. There are funny moments like when the computer AI gets drunk and makes a fly guy get stuck on a wall, or fly into a bomb and die in the explosion. Or when I somehow get hit by an enemy while jumping off of it at the same time. Or when Mario freaks out when standing on the edges of platforms. But it was a little less humorous when I tried jumping on the log in Tall Tall Mountain and seemingly bounced off an invisible wall. But like I said, this game is dated in a lot of areas, but also timeless in so many others. In fact, Super Mario 64 has a fair number of aspects that help add to its charm. Like, I'm pretty sure this is the first Mario game where Mario could actually go without his hat, and when you lose it, he takes more damage from touching enemies. I'm not sure how that works, though. Maybe he just feels naked without it. I even discovered a few more for the first time when preparing for this video. Like, after you defeat King Bob-omb in the first mission, he'll taunt you by saying, "You'll have to pick up the pace if you want to take King Bowser by the tail." A very nice little bit of foreshadowing. Oh, and if you find a group of 3 butterflies, touching one of them will cause it to turn into either a 1-up or a bomb. Is this what they call the butterfly effect? Also, if you perform the dive maneuver around the baby penguin, it'll try to copy you. That's so cute. It almost makes me feel bad for... well, you know. Speaking of which, another thing that happens when you get all the power stars is that the penguin in the cabin gets chonky. He says he stopped using the slide after he broke his record, so that caused him to put on some weight. I don't know why, but I just find that so funny. Part of me feels like I kinda hyped up the graphics a little too much in my original review, but for being one of the earliest Nintendo 64 games, visually, I think it still holds up. I especially love Mario's model just as much as I did in the past. It's a perfect translation from Yoichi Katabe's 2D artwork, and the low-poly version of him that appears when he's too far away from the camera is adorable, if a little unsettling up close. Most of the level themes are somewhat traditional, but others are more unique. And even with the more typical Mario settings, like the desert world, lava worlds, 2 snow worlds, and 3 water worlds, there's still a twist that makes them stand out. Tiny Huge Island even plays with the Giant Land gimmick from Mario 3 and lets you switch between small and big variations of the map. I always found it odd, though, how so many people refer to Dire Dire Docks when bringing up the game's water level music, when the first level you hear it in is either Jolly Roger Bay or the Secret Aquarium. By the way, when I said in my original video that Jolly Roger Bay was better than Dire Dire Docks because the former has a pirate ship, I wasn't being completely serious. Dire Dire Docks is still a cool level, but honestly, I do actually like Jolly Roger Bay a little more aesthetically. On the audio side, Koji Kondo once again delivers on a quality soundtrack. Though a few tracks are a little more atmospheric than something like Super Mario World, others are now considered to be among the most iconic tracks in the series, no more so than Bob-omb Battlefield. You know, for a theme tied to a war zone, it's incredibly jazzy. I can see why this is often considered to be the main theme of Mario 64. This same track reappears constantly throughout the game, both in its original form on stages like Whomp's Fortress and Tall Tall Mountain, as well as a winter theme variation in Cool Cool Mountain and Snowman's Land, and a more frantic arrangement for the slide stages, Tick-Tock Clock, and Rainbow Ride. But let's not sleep on the Bowser stage music, or the theme to Peach's Castle, or the credits theme, which has this wonderful sense of finality and closure and perfectly captures that warm feeling of satisfaction for having reached the end of your journey, as well as the sadness of knowing that it's over. But hands down, my favorite track in the entire game is the previously mentioned water theme. And if you ask me, it's the best water theme ever written for a Mario game. And of course, Super Mario 64 was also the first official Nintendo game to feature Charles Martinet as the voice of Mario. Although before Mario's voice was chosen, audio samples of Mel Blanc taken from a sound effects library were used as placeholders. I'm just glad they didn't use any clips of him as Christopher Columbus from that one Looney Tunes short.
She's around, she's a firm, she's a fully packed, she's around the back of my head!
I spent a lot of time talking about Charles in my original review, and it's interesting for me now going back to this game after I've been lucky enough to have met him in person on multiple occasions, and especially now that he's no longer voicing Mario in the games. Except when his clips are being recycled. Whether you love or hate Mario's voice, I completely understand where you're coming from. But I think it's important to acknowledge how much Mario's character was shaped by Charles's performance. Before this game, Mario didn't really have much of a defined personality, and on one hand, it's a textbook example of ethnic stereotypes. But on the other hand, Charles infused the character with so much joy that it's hard not to smile when listening to him. The fact that Mario's current voice actor, Kevin Afghani, is basically just doing an impression of Charles's voice is a testament to how much he brought to the role. For the record, I don't have anything against Kevin at all. I might have made some jokes about his Mario voice in the past, but stepping into a role that iconic is a thankless task, and genuinely, I'm just happy to see a fellow Mario fan living his dream. But Charles was to Mario what Tom Kenny is to SpongeBob, or what Kevin Conroy was to Batman. So much of my love for this character and this franchise is because of Charles. He's one of my heroes. He's everything you could ever hope he would be, and I can never thank him enough for all the work that he's done. Super Mario 64 shook the franchise in ways that are still being felt to this day, while also carving out its own unique legacy. Tick-Tock Clock was given its own track in Mario Kart DS, Whomp's Fortress returned as the throwback galaxy in Super Mario Galaxy 2, Metal Mario became his own separate entity and returned as a boss character in Super Smash Bros. And as a playable character in the Mario Kart games. The design of Peach's castle featured in the game was used as the basis for every other version of it that followed, and the Inside the Castle Walls track became the definitive theme for both the castle and Peach herself. And even the castle courtyard in all its 64-bit glory was brought back in Super Mario Odyssey, which also included Mario's model as he appears in Mario 64 as an alternate costume. The exterior of Peach's castle in its entirety was also ported over to the Royal Raceway track in Mario Kart 64, and you could even drive up to it and just mess around. Now, why in God's name did they lock it off in Mario Kart 8? Like, do they want us to have fun or not? Super Mario 64 was also the subject of countless rumors, including many regarding the mystery of Luigi's absence, such as the L is real 2401 myth. But during a huge Giga Leak back in 2020, when hundreds of Nintendo files were released online, it was revealed that Luigi was actually modeled and planned to be featured in the game. The game is also really big in the analog horror community for whatever reason. Mario 64 even found a second life in the fan game hacking scene. It has an unofficial PC port, it's been remade from scratch in different engines, there are tons and tons of fan sequels and mods out there. Wow, oh my god. Whoever's on fire out there, stop it! I'm trying to record a video here. And had these tools not been made available, SMG4 would probably never have gotten into making videos, which wouldn't have led to the creation of Glitch Productions. So I guess that means we also have Mario 64 to thank for the amazing digital circus. Maybe that's why the theme sounds so much like Super Mario World. But of course, Super Mario 64 was also given a remake for the Nintendo DS in 2004. I wasn't very kind to it the first time I spoke about it, and the second time, my thoughts on it were lukewarm at best. So now that I'm coming back to it for the third time, is it any better than I remember it? Well, you don't get to contort Mario's face on the title screen anymore. Instead, tapping it on the touchscreen takes you to this drawing menu, where you can either trace over images of Mario and Yoshi, or draw your own pictures and drag them around with a stylus. So I guess that means you technically can still mess with Mario's face, just in a different way. You know what? This is pretty fun. Oh, what? What? Get your mind out of the gutter. I'm just drawing Squidward, see? What did you think it was gonna be? The plot is pretty much the same, only this time Luigi was actually brought along for the ride. And Wario is also there.
I'm just here for the food.
They make their way to the castle, but they don't come back after a while, so Yoshi goes to find them, only to realize that they've been trapped inside the castle alongside Peach and the Toads. Now it's up to him to rescue them and basically get sidelined so that Mario can save the day once again. I figured I'd throw Mario 64 DS in here since it's been a while since I played it, but my thoughts surprisingly haven't really changed that much. If anything, I'm almost a little less enthusiastic about this version. At least I actually know what chewing someone out means now. Yeah, this is pretty embarrassing, but that moment in my original DS video when I was confused about Toad saying Peach was gonna chew him out for losing the Rec Room keys, I wasn't trying to make a joke. I had legitimately never heard that expression before at the time. Yeah, I'm kind of an idiot. Speaking of the Rec Room, Super Mario 64 DS also has a selection of minigames for you to play. While Mips was the only rabbit present in the original game, this version has tons of them.
They must be breeding like, well, rabbits.
Mario, Luigi, Yoshi, and Wario each have their own corresponding colors of rabbits to catch in different parts of the castle, and everyone they catch gives them a key to unlock a new minigame. There's not really much to talk about with them. Some of them are pretty fun and even kind of addicting, but most are either repeats or just slightly different versions of other minigames. Others are just straight up dull, like the pedal picking one. Also, I could never tell if the sad face has its mouth open or if it just grows a round mustache. Oh, and you can also find 8 shiny rabbits that spawn at random times, replacing certain normal rabbits, but I found this trick where I had Yoshi go in and out through the castle entrance and make them spawn in the front yard until I got them all. Oh, God, no, don't yawn. Not while recording. Super Mario 64 DS has all the makings of a pretty solid remake. Visually, it's a little more appealing, if a bit lacking in detail. Having the map visible on the bottom screen is very useful. I love using the L button to center the camera behind my character. And some of the new means of getting power stars are pretty fun, like the ones you get from collecting 5 silver stars, and the ones that appear for a short time when you hit a switch and force you to grab them before they disappear. Hot damn, that was pretty close. They also added the Super Mushroom as a new power-up, but here it acts like the Mega Mushroom from future games, and briefly turns you into an unstoppable giant. And no, I'm not going to be making an Attack on Titan joke again. I'm saving that for the new Super Mario Bros. Video, since that was the first one I made it in originally. Blah. Then there are obviously the added playable characters. And yes, I was one of those kids that genuinely thought you could play as Waluigi. I saw that fake magazine screenshot back in the day and thought it was real, and I actually tried using it to unlock Waluigi, and I remember being confused as to why I couldn't do it. But chances are, if you're as old as I am, you felt for it too. And if you say you knew it wasn't real, you're lying. As for the characters that actually are playable, Mario's the same as he was in the original, but then you have Yoshi, who can flutter jump, grab enemies with his tongue and spit them out, or turn them into eggs. Or cube-shaped ones if he eats a box. That's hilarious. Luigi has the highest jumps, this flying backward somersault that gives him extra distance, and makes the camera freak out when you try to center it behind him. And he's so light on his feet that he can even briefly run on water. Finally, there's Wario, who can't jump very high and moves the slowest of the four, but he's super strong and is the only character that can punch and destroy these black bricks. You switch between them by walking into their rooms after rescuing them, and while you can't swap them out during missions, you can at least find their hats lying around. Putting them on then turns you into whichever character the hat belongs to, but it gets knocked off whenever you take a hit. Oh, you dick! Super Mario 64 DS adds an extra 30 power stars to the total, meaning you now have 150 of them to grab. Some missions that were more annoying to beat in the original game are now made a lot easier thanks to the new characters. You could even use Luigi's floating flutter kick to cheat your way to the top of the castle early. But don't let the 1-ups know, they might get angry. Some missions were modified from the original as well, like how the red coins in Snowman's Land are now in the igloo instead of the main area, and the igloo itself was also given a huge makeover. Other missions were changed specifically to accommodate for each character, like how the first mission of Bob-omb Battlefield has Yoshi defeating King Bob-omb by holding bombs in his mouth and spitting them back at him, and then another mission has you fight him again, but in the exact same way as his original appearance. The first mission in Hazy Maze Cave also now has a giant rock that Wario needs to punch to break open and release the Power Star from inside. Oh, does that mean he's been Chris Redfield's personal trainer this whole time? Of course, there were also missions that were a pain in the original and still just as cumbersome here, like Snowman's Lost His Head. But while I don't mind others being completely altered from the original, the ways in which a few of them were changed are a bit perplexing. Pyramid Puzzle in Shifting Sandland was made into a Silver Star mission, which is fine, but the game makes no indication of that when you go in. I'm glad it's at least a bit easier, but they should have called it Silver Stars in the Pyramid or something like that. Worst of all, in Tall Tall Mountain, the area with the star that you get from Mysterious Mountainside is completely fenced off now, so you can't jump out and go back to the bottom of the mountain like you could in the original, needlessly making the 100-coin star in this area more of a dick twist.
Oh my god! Oh, dick twist!
Super Mario 64 DS makes some other interesting design choices. The special caps, for example, were replaced with something called a power flower that affects each character in a different way when they touch it. So Mario gets his balloon form from Super Mario World. That immediately wears off when he touches a pole. Yoshi gets heartburn and spits fire. Luigi gets the vanish form, and Wario gets the metal form. As for the wing form, when you're playing as Mario, hitting blocks might make a feather come out that gives him the wing cap. And outside of Versus mode, Mario is the only character that can use this form. Oh my. Sometimes you won't even get a feather or a flower. Hitting blocks as Mario might sometimes make a Bob-omb come out of them for seemingly no reason other than to annoy you. This game generally just approaches the character system in a weird way. You start off as Yoshi, but after rescuing Mario, he's never really needed again outside of missions that require you to use him, which, depending on how you get through the game, can be totally optional. Then there's how they limit what each character can and can't do. It makes sense for Yoshi not being able to punch or kick, since he can just grab enemies with his tongue and eat them. But for being the first character you play as, why'd they make him so weak? He's the only character that can't break red bricks in any way, and he can't ground pound on boos to kill them either, meaning he's also the only character in the game that you can't bring to Big Boo's haunt. So why did they give him so much significance at the start of the game, and then completely push him aside for the rest of it? Mario being the only character that can unlock the big star doors and take on Bowser is fair, but why does he also have to be the only character that can wall jump? I don't think it would have made the game that much easier if Luigi and Wario could do it too. What really bogs the game down, however, is the limitations of the DS hardware. Some of it I can look past, like how the B and A functions were swapped so that B acts as the jump button and A is the attack button, and the X button switches between camera positions, which is fine. But as for movement, well, since the Nintendo DS doesn't have an analog stick like the N64 controller, they made it so that you either move the characters around with the D-pad and hold the Y button to run, or drag your stylus around on the touchscreen. a feature that was clearly implemented more with left-handed players in mind, and is otherwise incredibly awkward. People in the comments on my original Mario 64 video were quick to tell me that I could work around this by playing on the 3DS and using the circle pad to get a slightly smoother experience, and I already knew I could do that. I just didn't bring it up back then because I wanted to look at the game as it was meant to be played when it first came out. But while yes, the circle pad does make it feel a little better, it's essentially a digital D-pad, so you're still not getting anywhere close to the same sense of fluid analog movement that you can get on the original. Not helping is that the physics somehow feel both tighter and looser at the same time. It's like sometimes they'll be pretty precise, but then other times they'll just function however they want. I guess in that sense you could say it's more inconsistent than the original. This version also didn't seem to address the collision detection issues with the N64 game. If anything, they're accentuated here. Sometimes I can use them to my advantage, like changing the camera view during the fight with Bowser in the Fire Sea to avoid sliding when the stage tilts. But then there were times where I slid into a Koopa Troopa and then somehow got knocked back by it after making it pop out of its shell. And on other occasions, I'd propel myself off of blocks and platforms, somehow just by punching a Goomba, trying to move forward and grab a Switch Star, or even landing on a block. Like, what happened here? Was it Jasper the douchebag ghost?
Jasper the douchebag ghost!
Well, regardless of its faults, Super Mario 64 DS still has fans, and I can't say I'm uncomfortable with that. For some people, this was their first exposure to Mario 64 in any capacity, and to its credit, it's not a terrible way to experience it. It can still be a lot of fun and has enough going for it to make it worth your while. But there are just too many cracks at the seams for me personally to consider it the definitive version of the game, and it has almost everything to do with the limitations of the hardware. Bringing Mario 64 to the DS was a tall order, and I am at least impressed with the final result, but I think they should have just held off on it and waited to remake it for the 3DS, or give us a completely new game designed specifically for the DS without having to worry about making compromises for the sake of fitting a game like Mario 64 onto a much less powerful system. But hey, at least it got its own minigame in WarioWare Move It, so that's one thing it has over the original, I guess. Obviously, though, I prefer the N64 game, but while I have my gripes with the DS version, there was still plenty about it that I enjoyed. There's enough going for it, in fact, that if you haven't played this game at any point in your life, either version would be good for you to approach. But now that Mario successfully made the jump into the third dimension, where do things go from here? Find out next time when we go back to Super Mario Sunshine. I don't really have to play this game again, do I? Alright, fine. The next game we'll be revisiting is Super Mario Sunshine for the GameCube. Damn it. Well, until then, this is Marc, aka SuperSmash3DS, bidding you all a smashing farewell. But before we go, once again, I'd like to give a special thank you to my Superstar supporters, Red Rack, Henry Newman, and Jake Winans. And also, a special thanks to the person whose name is on screen at the moment. And since I'm here, I know I put out an update video a while ago saying that I wanted to put out more videos on a more consistent schedule, and that doesn't seem to be the case right now, but trust me, I am still very hard at work on this last batch of videos. In fact, by the time I'm recording this, I already have the entirety of my Sunshine gameplay recorded, and I already have a lot of notes taken for it. So I'm already much farther along with that video than I usually am when I put out these Super Smash Revisited episodes. I also have footage recorded for the next batch of main reviews, and I'm gonna try working on those as soon as possible. I really want to commit to putting more videos out before the end of the year, and certainly going into next year. I am going on a brief vacation at the beginning of August, but after that, I'm going right back to work on these videos, because even though things are kind of winding down around here, as I've said before, I don't want to just sloppily throw some videos together and put them out, get them done and over with, and quickly get to the last one. I still want to put as much effort into these last few videos than I would with any other videos that I do. And even if not a lot of people stick around and watch them, I at least want to give back to the people that do stick around and watch them. So Hopefully you'll have some really good stuff to look forward to. And until next time, be good, behave, be safe, and I'll see you later. Take care, guys.